We are in the book of Romans in the 12th chapter. And last week we covered an immense passage of Scripture. We looked at verses 9 through 11, and we covered all three of those verses in the Bible study. So we were really covering a lot of ground. So we're going to pick up there in the 12th verse and work through the end of this chapter. And as we commented last week, the Romans, the 12th chapter, is called the Little Bible because it covers such a wide range of topics. And one of the reasons as we get into this 12th chapter, we slow up even more than we normally do is because the topics that are being put out there by Paul at this point are very concise concepts. They're actually very broad in their implications. But would someone start us this morning by reading verses 9 through 20, please? Or I'm sorry, 21. Romans 12.
Let love be genuine, abhor what is evil, hold fast to what is good. Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not be slothful in zeal, be fervent in spirit, serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation, be constant in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. Bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, be associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own sight. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For by so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good.
Okay, thank you, Russ. So we spent some time last week talking about love. And the concepts that really permeate everything that Paul is saying in this chapter, at least in my mind, as I understand it, is love. Let your love be genuine and outdo one another. That's something we do a pretty good job of trying, right? We are constantly trying to outdo one another. There's some concepts in the Bible study, in the sermon this morning we'll look at, is we look at the Beatitudes. But mankind, and not just mankind, all of nature is constantly trying to outdo one another. The premise of nature is competition, right? So we always have to get over or on top of someone else to survive, to be secure, and it's something very instinctual within us all. But here Paul says that we are to outdo one another in what? The end of verse 10, that was. Showing honor. What that means, I believe, is that I am trying to honor you more than you could honor me. I am trying to lift you up more than you could lift me up. And when you think about Jesus' teachings with the upside-down kingdom, it is a race to the bottom, isn't it? Jesus said, if you want to be great in the kingdom, be the servant. And so it is a concept of lifting others up, not getting on top of each other. So love and honoring each other are the concepts that follow through here. So with that then, as Russ read for us, I had mentioned that we'd finished in verse 12. Verse 13 continues with that very theme. So he's talking about numerous different things that we can do because we have the mercies of God, because he's made a way of salvation or back to him by faith in the gospel of Jesus Christ. And he's done all the things that we studied about in the first 10 verses, the first 11 chapters, Here's how we are to act. Contribute to the needs of the saints. Contribute to the needs of the saints. What does that mean? Support one another. Yeah, whatever the need is, help your brother out. And Mike, use that word brother. The word saints is used here. We're talking about the brotherhood of Christ, right? We're talking within the church. Now, we could look at other passages. It's not our immediate context, but we also have responsibility to mankind. What we're talking about right here is meeting needs of our fellow Christians with one another. Sometimes we hear that word contribute, and we think, what? What's the first thing that comes to your mind? Money. Yeah, because we call, when we pass these plates, what? Contribution. It is a Western concept, and in particular an American concept within the church, that we think that we can pay money and have someone else be a Christian for us, right? That is a way of contributing. In fact, in context, you will recall at the end of Paul's life, in his last stages in the book of Acts, that he's went around, and Rome is not one of the congregations he was at, but he has them contribute financially because there's a famine and difficulty back in Jerusalem, and he brings the financial support back to Jerusalem to support the saints that were there. It's part of it, but it's not the entirety, right? It's something we do. If we have something, that we help one another. The book of Acts, the 2nd chapter, there, when you see these people obeying the gospel, there's some things that we put high up on our priority list as things we do as a Christian, right? If you don't do this, you're not a Christian. What's interesting for me to take note of what the very first Christians did and what Luke records was important to them. Amongst that was they had all things in common. Mike, Amanda and I were attending at Trenum, and I bought my very first new truck. And I remember the first time I drove it service, Robert quoted that passage to me and said, we should have all things in common. So would you mind me borrowing your truck? I said, not at all, but all things include the dead on it too. So would you please kindly dish over some money? He laughed, and we had a good time with it. But we're talking about needs here, aren't we? About addressing the needs of one another. One of the challenges, quite frankly, that I think the church struggles with, and when I say this, by no means do I think it's a hopeless case. In many ways, I think we are confronting this struggle and this challenge. But one of the biggest struggles I believe we have is we don't know each other well enough to know what our needs and struggles are. I've got a problem, quite honestly, calling someone who we haven't seen in 2 or 3 weeks and saying, why aren't you at services? You need to be at services. Sometimes we paint that as a godly thing to do. I think what we're reading here, and of course it's a simple statement, and I'm elaborating on it, but I'm trying to do so through the lens of Jesus Christ, is to know one another, to know why someone's not there. And to know their struggles so we can be helping them with that struggle. You see the change in focus? It's incredible, and it has a tremendous impact. Contribute to the needs of the saints. Here's what's interesting. Other people's needs are never convenient, are they? My door is always open over at the house, sometimes literally. Most of the time, literally. And in saying this, by no means do I want to discourage anyone by showing up. But you know when the unexpected visitor in time of need shows up at my place? Normally 2 different times. 11 o'clock at night or any time trying to rest, right? I just, just knock at the door. Or I have more than I can get done going on. Someone shows up. That's the way it works. Now, again, that's not to discourage anyone from express need. To the contrary. The point is the priority should be people. We get so tied up in accomplishing things that we miss out on people. Jesus' focus was people. And contribute to the needs. Questions or comments? Dave?
I like how he backs it up with seek to show hospitality. That's impressive. Do that and then do more. And
Yes.
now I'm reading that.
Yes, so great transition, Dave, and perfect timing. Because that next phrase, and seek to show hospitality. Now, it's debatable in my mind as to whether he's expanding this beyond the church at this point or not. Whether he is or not in this particular verse is kind of irrelevant because Scripture expands it beyond the church, right? But Dave has a great point. Notice the and. And this kind of complements what has just been said, and it's why I was introducing that idea a few minutes ago. Showing hospitality isn't solely meeting needs, is it? Let me rephrase that. It's not meeting physical needs. It's meeting other kind of needs and needs before they're even apparent. There's traditions and ways of life that have changed so much. And that's all right. But we still have to meet our obligations and responsibilities to one another. When I was young, Sunday afternoons typically were spent, especially in years before the trail ride, at people's houses or people at our house, right? Having lunch together. I've tried to continue that tradition. It's not something that we see very often, but we have to get to know one another. If you can't invite someone into your house, go out to eat with them, right? Find ways of spending time with each other. Show hospitality. It's a way of getting to know people before there's a need, before they're in crisis. And if we're really fortunate, maybe to help each other avoid some of the crises in our lives. Questions, comments? I'll pause here for a second. Connie and Gary are shouting out from Florida today. Joe brought us some sunshine there from Newcastle, and Connie and Gary are down there basking in it. And so bringing it up that way. We're glad you guys made it there safely and are able to join us this morning. Verse 14. Oh, wait. How about we skip over 14? Anyone really not want to skip over 14? Dave insists. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Ooh. Why would I want to skip over that verse? Yeah, hard thing to do. Very hard, isn't it? Jesus in Sermon on the Mount, another week or so, hopefully we'll get to this, he brings up the concept of if you love your friends, if you treat your friends well, what do you think makes you so special? Now, if you want to love your enemies, those who persecute you, now you are going somewhere, right? Let me come back to this, or skip ahead to verse 20. And we'll readdress it, so we won't spend many time. But to the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For by doing so, you will heap coals, burning coals upon his head. Oh, you know what I was told a few times? Quite a few times, actually. In fact, the most common way I've heard that taught is be friendly to those who aren't friendly to, because he'll just burn them up. He'll make them miserable. Wait, wrong. That's the exact opposite of what Paul is teaching. It's the exact opposite of what Jesus teaches. Now, there's some truth in it. That really bothers someone, but that's not our purpose. The burning coals were something that was used to purify and to make precious, to get rid of impurities. That's our goal by being nice to those who persecute us. That's our goal by being kind to our enemies. So that via our example, they could be purified and get to know Jesus Christ. It's not to make them miserable. That does happen occasionally. And the human side of us kind of snickers at that, right? I believe we should recognize that as our failures that are contrary to the purpose of Christ. Those passages make anyone here feel warm and fuzzy? No. If they do, you're a great person or delusional. One's probably more likely than the other, right? Verse 15. Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. The concept of empathy. You know, when someone has something good happen in their life, it's a large percentage of people that will scowl upon that, look for them to fail, right? Buy a new vehicle, and what's one of the most common things you say? Kevin, you put, what was it, 480,000 miles on your previous truck? 420, I was exaggerating by a little bit. 420,000 miles on your truck. Then you buy a new one, and people say, now I see who has the money. Right? Now I see who's rolling in it. Envious, jealous comments, right? Not appropriate as Christians, right? We see someone fail. We see someone mourning. That serves them right. Not congruent with Christianity. Now, Christians have those thoughts, have those beliefs, say those things. It's the side of the flesh that we're trying to purify ourselves from, right? Empathy. One of the things when people mourn, when people are in difficulties that we hear over and over and over again is they made decisions to get themselves there. That's their own fault. The vast majority of the time, that is true. But guess what? If it's the vast majority of the time true about their problems, it's true about my problems too. It's really not relevant to as our responsibility as Christians to our fellow mankind. Questions or comments? A lot of silence tonight, or this morning. A lot of silence. By the way, let me pause here with that. Is we look at this idea, remember verse 1, by the mercies of God. Why do we do all these things? Why do we strive for them? Because God did them for me. I love him because he first loved me. God treated me lovingly when I was his enemy.
A lot of what this is talking about too is just being there as a Christian. Just, like it talks about weeping with the weep, when they weep, rejoicing, contributing to the needs, showing hospitality. I mean, it's all pointing to just not only coming to church and sitting here and listening, but just being there for people in general.
Yes, absolutely. One of the barriers, and I think I'm on the same wavelength as Russ here. One of the barriers that we oftentimes hear for being there for people is I don't know what to say. And someone brought up, we were saying about Job's friends, and Job's friends show up, and they sit for him, is it 7 days, with him for 7 days? And then they start to talk. For the first 7 days, and I may be wrong on how many days it was, may have been 3 days. Forgive me, please, if I'm wrong on how many days. But for the first stint, when Job's friends didn't say a word, they were really good friends. They go downhill in a hurry after that. When people are particularly mourning, Russ says about being there as people, presence means a lot. I try to remember that because most of the time when I speak, things do go downhill. So I try and remember that, right? Be there with someone. I don't have to know what to say. In fact, most of the time, people don't want us trying to fix their problems because we can't fix our problems. Be there for one another. Russ, were we going in the same direction there? Thank you for that. Verse 16. I brought my songbook up here for this person. Live in harmony with one another. I forgot to bring my King James up here. Is that peace in King James? Okay, be of the same mind. Sorry, knocking stuff all around here. This word in, we sang verse 7, or number 700 for opening song this morning. If you want to turn your songbooks there to the work. Be of the same mind. What's interesting to me, verses 3 through 8 that we looked at a couple weeks ago, I think is dealing with this idea. Sometimes when we think about being of the same mind, we think about conformity, right? But conformity doesn't work unless A, someone is bullied, right? B, someone's very unintelligent, has no original thoughts for themselves. We just aren't the same, are we? Chris, does Brittany see things the exact same way as you do? He shakes his head no. Brittany, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
depends.
It depends. Are your lives enriched or deteriorated by your differences? Wait, it depends, doesn't it? Broadly speaking, do your different talents brought to the marriage enhance the marriage? Now, those ideas of it depends, I would suggest, or I would think, I mean to say, most of the time is whether you're on the same page of the end goals, right? There's sometimes you have different goals, and that conflict starts to tear at things, doesn't it? But when we have the same goal, I get a lot smarter when Amanda's by my side. Harmony. It's a term we're familiar with in singing. If you open to 700, the last phrase, and our books are all written in 4-part harmony, right? Horrible. John Kerr asked me yesterday, he said, hey, would you like to trade pulpits tomorrow night? This was yesterday. I said, well, you would like to, I'll look into it. He said, oh, good, we're having a singing night up here. And I said, well, the brethren might not know enough up there not to be accepting of me, but they would after I was there one time. So let's not do that harm. He was giving me a hard time. Look at the last line, though, in our song. And the top line is, let us hope, let us watch, and labor till the Master comes. Now, there's another part here. Actually, we don't necessarily sing it this way, but 3 of the 4 parts have more words than that, right? Let us hope and trust. Let us watch and pray and labor till the Master. You see what happens when we don't have harmony? We lose a significant part of the message, don't we? The point is not about singing so much. The point is that our differences, if we are united in the cause of Christ, enrich our lives, enrich our purpose, enrich everything we do, broaden the message. Let us live in harmony with one another. I think that means that I'm building you up. I'm drawing you closer to Christ. That I'm helping you along your walk to live in godly fashion. And you are helping me to do the same. That's the concept of harmony. It's not just peace. It's not just you sit in that corner and I'll sit over in this corner. It's being united, as King James brings out, in the same mind, the same purpose, the same goal to move forward and to help one another. That can't be done unless we're willing to give of ourselves, right? Now, I use my marriage a lot for examples, only partially. Partial might be more than 50%, but only partially because it irritates Amanda when I do so. But there are some other purposes there. Do you know how I believe Amanda and I could get along a lot better? Any guesses? That would be true if I kept my mouth shut. But I don't like that, Kevin. So that wouldn't be good. Any other ideas? Because if we harmonize, well, that would be true. That would be an ideal to sit through. But we're talking about my flawed concept. What I... Oh, Russ has it. If she did everything I told her to do, and she agreed with me on everything, we would be so much better off. What other mind matters, Mike? In fact, I think Lisa probably had a term coming to her mind when I was describing my idea. No? Someone did, I'm sure. Could be a litany of words. Arrogant, sexist, right? I'm lording over her in that case. Here's the only way we can live in harmony. The end of verse 16 or second half. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Wow. I think we're going to emphasize that idea in the Sermon on the Mount this morning. You see, that just turned it upside down. What that passage, second half of that verse just told me, is for Amanda and I to do better. I've got to understand she's smarter than I am. I've got to have a lack of arrogance. And be willing to associate with the lowly. I know you think you know where I was going with that. I knew that's where we'd be going. But what about, there's concept that's true, right? Where we're lowering ourselves no matter how low we see people. But what if I'm willing to associate with the lowly tasks? The lowly jobs, the lowly ideas, right? The ones no one else wants to do. Kind of brings out, in fact, a literal translation of that concept is give yourself to humble tasks, right? That brings about harmony. That brings about this concept of synergy, is a word we use a lot today. Thank you. Questions, comments? Lord willing, we'll pick up there next week.